welcome back. We're here this morning with the Ariens 20 horsepower riding mower. Got this given to us, picked it up a couple days ago. We're going to check it out and figure out what's going on and get this thing back into working order. First thing we like to do is hit the like and subscribe button before we get started on anything, but we like to drain the fuel out. We don't know where this fuel came from or anything like that, so we're going to get the fuel drained out of the tank, and then there is no battery in it. We use this handy fuel extractor made by OEM Tools. It's meant for oil and other fluids, but it works well for gasoline if you're using the air-powered area. Now the pump is broken because of that, I believe. The fuel gets in there and ruins the rubber, and then the sleeve doesn't fit on the inside. This one broke before we started using it for fuel. That's why we're using it for fuel. Still works great for that, even though the pump's broken. Looks like there was a wasp nest right up on top. Luckily not active anymore. The tank doesn't look too bad. Few pieces of bugs, dirt, and debris down in there. I did check the oil previously before bringing this in. Obviously I didn't want to push it in and push it up here if it wasn't going to be worth doing anything to. Oil level is actually pretty good and almost perfect level, which honestly on something like this kind of scares me, because it shouldn't be like that if someone's just given this to us. One of the first things I notice as I'm looking, there's the hose for the pulse of the fuel pump, and it is disconnected. It's broken, cracked completely. So this fuel pump's not going to work without that in there. We will finish draining the rest of the fuel out of the line and stuff by taking it off here. Just ensures that as much fuel as we can gets out of it, just to start off with some fresh. I'm gonna take a look real quick and see if I can't find a hose for this. As I come to take a look at the boneyard back here, very quickly spot something that should work for exactly what I need it for on this engine. May not be the exact one I need, but it'll get me back pumping, that's for sure. Again, old versus new. Take the old one out, put the new one on. And again, I like to make sure that these engines A, aren't locked up, and B, have sufficient oil before I pull them in to do anything to them, especially if it's a freebie. A lot of times people will give you something that's locked up or something to that effect, which is fine. We still take them, we'll strip them out, use them for parts. That's exactly what I needed. That works perfect on there. Great. Throw a new battery in since this one was missing. We used 1/4 inch stainless steel bolts, washers, and nuts. And then we used Die-Hard 340 cold cranking amp battery. Just 425 regular cranking amps. Just seems like with any of these mowers, it's a lot better on the electrical system, so it's not drawing higher amperage than it should. Has plenty of beef to it. I picked up, we usually get 10 of these at a time. When we get them from Advance Auto, they'll come bring them by for us. Well, they accidentally brought a U1-1 instead of a U1-3, which is like 150 cold cranking amps, I believe. Well, instantly when I picked it up, I knew It wasn't the right battery. You can tell by the weight of it. These are so much heavier. What I was really impressed with on this mower when we got it is the lack of oil leaking in places. This has the Briggs Intek V twin on it, 20 horsepower. Usually when we get them, they're seeping oil everywhere. You know, head gaskets, valve cover gaskets, crankcase gasket. This thing's dry. For a mower with, well, it doesn't have an hour meter, so I don't really know how many hours or anything it has on it. We've cleaned out the fuel system. I'm gonna go ahead and blow it out real quick. Just wanted to make sure if there was anything left in there as far as dirt or debris or bugs or anything that didn't get caught in the fuel line or in the filter. These do, where they come through, the grommet comes through the bottom of the tank, and there's a little nipple that goes through there, so it actually, the tank acts as a sediment trap and a water trap before actually getting to the mower. There's still about 1/8 of an inch or 3/16 of an inch down at the bottom of the tank, even when the thing's empty. That's not going to dump down into the fuel line. Ideal, probably not, just because things can gather there, but it does act as that kind of thing. Let's see what we got. I don't hear anything at all when I turn the ignition to on. The first thing I'm going to do is test the voltage at the fuse itself. You can test both to the back and to the front of the fuse. You got 12.43 there. 12.43 there. That obviously means this fuse is good. You can also test it on top. Either way, you're still testing both sides of the fuse. So we know we have voltage going to the main power of the unit, which would mean your switch, your ignition switch. You can very easily see the solenoid at the back of the unit, in between the tires, just behind the battery where it sits. Now these two wires, one of them coming in is hot from the battery, and the other one goes directly to the starter. If we wanted to test the starter or the solenoid, we could just jump those across. I'm going to test the two smaller wires going to the solenoid first and see if we're actually getting any voltage to those wires. If we are getting voltage to them, then we know the solenoid is bad. That's going to be our likely issue. If we aren't getting voltage, we know we have a bad wire, or we have another issue with one of the safeties. Kind of hard to get to, and I'm not sure. I guess it's the far side one that's hot, so I'm not worried about touching this one. But you don't want to touch the hot one for sure. Oops. Thought I was getting shocked for a second. Since it's got two wires, we're just going to test between the two while we turn the key and see what we get. I am getting nothing. I pulled the ignition switch out here, and I've got it set just to the on position, not to the reverse position, but just to on. If you test it back to ground on your red wire, you should be getting 12 volts, which we are. Let's see if I can get this to where we can see it and you can still see everything behind. So red wire, 12 volts. And then when the ignition's turned on, your blue wire or purple wire, whatever it is, up here, it's a little tab on the back side up top. It should also say 12 volts plus. And then when you turn the key on the white wire, you should have over 12 volts. That's showing that your ignition switch is working properly. Everything here is good. So one of the safety switches is not allowing voltage to get to the solenoid, is what our issue is. We're gonna test the safety switches on this. First one I like to check is the seat switch. I see this all the time where there's an issue with the safety and the seat switch causing this. As I take out the seat switch here, gonna push it straight down. Take the tab off and push it straight down. Right here, as we're looking at the safety switch, we just pulled off. You just take this tab, pull it back, pull it straight down again. There is a safety switch right in here that has 4 tabs, and basically that connects all of them if the switch is not plugged in. I see that go bad all the time. I like to just remove that. And you can do that by just pushing on the little tab here, and it'll push it up and out. And you can just take a pair of needle nose and pull the whole thing the rest of the way out. That's a safety so you can't bypass the seat switch and stuff like that. Very good for testing. This will tell us if it's bad or not. Because if it fails, if it thinks that you're trying to bypass the safety switch, it will not start. Move that seat forward and make it a little bit easier to get to. Plug it back in or to take it off originally. Got it plugged back in now. It now turns over. I do not know if I'm actually getting fuel to the carburetor, but I'm going to show you an easy trick to get it started. Even if you have bad fuel in it, a lot of times once it starts, it'll stay running. Take off the air cleaner cover, and then the air cleaner. It's in pretty bad shape. Now we're just going to spray some carburetor cleaner, starting fluid, fuel, whatever, down in the intake. And try it again. So it just burnt that off and died right back out. We'll try it again. Definitely either not getting fuel or the carburetor's gummed up. I'm not sure exactly how long it's been sitting. Let's test and see if our fuel pump is actually pumping. Sure seems to be. There it goes with a pretty good flow. Plug that back in one more time. It seemed like it was a pretty small flow at first. Looks like this one is going to need some addressing to the carburetor. Now that the hood's off, let's see what kind of condition this carburetor's in, that it's not working at all. It could be just that the solenoid is bad or that it's all gummed up. Could be that the rest of the carburetor's bad too. Just gonna take off a few 5/16 screws off the fuel pump, off the top, and then we've got 3/8 bolts holding the rest of the housing on. Should also be 2 down in here, but it looks like maybe on this one they don't have those 2. with that different carburetor design. Tried to finish this up the other day, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. Didn't get around to it. These back two, I can't use my right angle on. It just doesn't quite fit in there. Whole top is off, so we have access. Everything there looks great. I don't see any seepage of the head gaskets anywhere. Yeah, very good condition for how old I think this mower is anyway. I mean, it's got some good life on it. I'm gonna take the carburetor off. It's just a couple T40s, I believe, and then got the solenoid here, wire. Got a couple T30s holding it on. Sometimes because of the Loctite they put on them, they're kind of hard to get out of there. That one I'm going to want to loosen at least first with my 3/8 before I start to take it out. Pretty tight in there. Just can't get the best angle on this one. These top two do go through the backside just a little bit, so they're prone to get rust and stuff on the backside. After we've got those four out, we've got a couple tubes up top. One right here for the breather on the back that can be just taken straight off, and then one for the EPA line going to the fuel tank. Kind of the same way. That one just kind of busted off there, but and the other one just snaps in the middle here. As you go to take everything else off, your choke, the linkage, just pulls straight out. That piece gets removed. And then the other linkage here, you've got to kind of go to the side. So you've got to move this all to the side and take it out of the governor arm, along with the spring. So that gives you a perfect angle to get it out of the hole. It looks like I'm definitely getting some fuel in the carburetor, so that's at least good. We already knew the fuel pump was pumping though. I'll take off the fuel line here, get us completely the rest of the way free. And that fuel does smell horrible. Twist this, free the fuel line up, and then pull it straight off the front. Okay. That looks like pretty good fuel. That's probably the fresh fuel we have in there since we kind of blew everything else out. Doesn't look like it's free flowing anymore. I think I've got it probably above the fuel level in the tank. Didn't put a ton in it. Now we can take all this apart and figure out exactly what's going on. We have an 11 millimeter to take off the two nuts from the front. Not a real good angle to get in there. Comes straight off. Got a gasket that's on the carburetor there. And then you've got two internal Torx that need to come off here. I believe that's a E5. It's an E5 internal Torx. They call them an E-socket. Take those two off. Looks like we got a mud dauber nest there. trying to save this front gasket, you can take those off both at the same time evenly and it won't ruin it. It won't push this carburetor out past. You can tell that this spring has seen some better days. It's been stretched out pretty good. Not gonna worry too much about it right now, but it comes out. So this, when you're putting it back in, it goes straight in and twists around, and that's how it sits to the outside. Take those out real quick. This one sits in the back side on that right one. Mark it. These carburetors aren't nearly as common as some of the other ones we work on. They're starting to be on a lot of things, but not quite yet. So that one didn't fare very well. All right. Butchered that gasket. No big deal. We'll get a new one on there when we get to put it back together. Got a pair of pliers just to kind of start these. I like to break them free each time like this. Others say they don't have any issues with them, but I normally do. As soon as you break them free, they'll come right out. You can mark a spot so you know which way this goes back on. But if you're looking at it, the intake's going to come towards you, so you want the solenoid facing out to the left. Because on this one, the throttle is going to be towards you and the intake's going to be towards the back, actually. So definitely some pretty nasty fuel. You can see all the gum and varnish all up around it, all up around all of these. Nothing really too bad a shape though for this to be acting the way that it is. Let's take the solenoid off and see what it's doing. Got a 1/2 inch wrench. The solenoid will not go in, so I can't even push it in. If I push real hard, now it's in and it's stuck. So that's likely going to be our issue. It's just that the solenoid was all gummed up. Our main jet down through looks very clear. All the gaskets and everything look okay. I don't see any issues. The issue here we're having is that the solenoid was stuck. If the solenoid doesn't come back, it doesn't allow your unit any fuel. If you're having this same issue, you can pull the solenoid first. Since we're going to sell this, I would have definitely wanted to pull it anyway and get all this off. It probably wouldn't have ran real great. We're going to throw this in the ultrasonic just for a few minutes. And then we'll put this thing all back together. And we'll be ready to rock. Now this piece I'm not going to throw in the ultrasonic. I don't want it swelling up the O-ring that's around that main jet. If that happens, you'll have to replace that main jet, or the O-ring in it at least. With the pretty decent condition that this is in, I decided that I'm not actually going to completely throw this in the ultrasonic. I don't have any good water back there to begin with this morning. Clean this all up by hand using Gum Out Carb Cleaner. And then we're going to use compressed air on top of that. That soak down in there just for a minute. We finish up the rest of it. You want to be very careful not to leave anything in this main jet. If there's anything at all in that jet, by the time we're done, it's going to cause it not to run good. Oh, well, there goes the main jet. It's never a good thing when that comes out. If it comes out, you normally want to replace the O-ring that is on it. If you don't, many times you run right into issues. Seemed like it snapped back down in there pretty good. Nope, sure didn't. So when you're cleaning all this up, you want to make sure just that main jet and then the emulsion tube is all good to go. You should be able to see straight through these. If you're looking through these holes, you should be able to see straight through them. And if not, you can use a piece of a wire brush or a torch tip cleaner or something like that to clean them out. Once you think you have your solenoid freed up, you can test it by plugging it back in at the mower and turning the ignition switch on. When that happens, it should go in and then it should come back out when you turn it off. In, out. It shouldn't be sluggish at all. If it is, you know you've got issues with it. This one's working good. You should hear that click too. As we finish this up, we want to get all this extra gasket material off of the carburetor. You want a nice smooth seal there. If you don't have it, it'll pull in debris and it'll cause less life of your mower, of your engine. Great. What I always tell everyone, if you can't feel it, it's not there. The rest of the paper will seal to it. This is doing pretty well as far as being clean. All of the area down in the emulsion tube, you want that cleaned off real well. I like to use just a wire brush. Works very well on these. Do not get that gasket or O-ring in there with the wire brush. It will ruin it. You should be able to see straight through these holes all the way through. If you can't, you know you have an issue. You should also not get anything up through here. If you do, it's not going to run right. You can use torch tip cleaners. You can use pieces of this wire loom. A lot of times I like to just pull them out. Use like a pair of needle nose pliers and pull them out. Just makes it easy in order to get all that clean. You'll also want to make sure that your jet is completely clear. If it's not, you'll have issues when you go to put this back together. And this is all looking good. Clean the rest of this up one last time. That's all clear. The jet's nice and clear. You want to make sure not to disturb that down in there. If you disturb the jet and poke it out of there, it's not going to seat right again when it goes back in. That's why I'm being very careful with it. We will replace also the gasket on this side of the carburetor. I don't like to reuse them. If you get an air leak there, you'll have major issues. So we'll do the same thing here. One of the most common mistakes I see when people do it themselves is that they'll reuse these gaskets and get an air leak there and it won't run right. It'll either race or surge. Good. Grab our needle, go ahead and put it back in the float. Make sure anything that's on here ends up getting off before we put it back together. Otherwise, again, we will have an issue with it. Going back together. Okay, let's put this how it should be. Or you can also put it on the other side too. Just like such. Get this all together. It's fitting in there nicely. If it's all swolled up or anything like that, you'll want to replace that gasket. This one looks in really good shape. Not seeing any issues. Get that clean. And make sure that O-ring is intact down in there also. If it's not, or if there's anything blocking this main fuel passageway, it will not work right. You won't get any fuel to the mower. Make sure our lines match back up where they came from as we put it back together. Straight down in. Should kind of feel like it's tight. It should feel like it's sealing as it's going down in. Now we can put our solenoid back in. So it is on there, I couldn't tell for sure, but there's actually an aluminum washer that sits on there, and that seals everything off. Still a little bit of green on this. A little bit of ethanol gunk, but everything else is free. It snaps right back just like it should, and we already tested it. We know it works. As we go to put it back together, we want our choke piece here. The yellow came off of there with the carb cleaner, but this should snap back like such. And this piece should be here, so when the intake is facing towards the back of the engine, it'll snap right in for that choke. On the other side, this goes just like such, straight in and twists around. And then this actually sits right at the top. Like such, just like that. And it'll go back in. This will hook down into the governor arm, and this will hook like this, like we took it out. Got a new gasket in between the carburetor and the back. Seems like this we want to start tightening this up. We've got a new gasket in between the carburetor and the back. Tighten it down here. And then I just had another gasket sitting around. It's not new, but it is in good shape for the front. So we'll put that back on. While I'm here, I'm going to take this PA line off, so it'll go on that other spot. And then these gaskets going towards the intake, you'll always want to replace those. If you don't, again, you may have an air leak in between the intake and the block. If that happens, definitely not going to be good news. Yeah, these seem pretty stout. They come in a pack of 2. They are exactly the same either side if you're looking at them. So it doesn't matter which side goes in. See how much they have there at the top, and that's going to seal real well. Make sure all that's cleaned off. Doesn't really look like anything bad there, but now we're ready to put this carburetor back on and see how this thing runs. First, I like to get the spring here onto the governor arm in the smaller hole to the back side, and then we can get the linkage back on. It's kind of hard to do, is you have to stretch it quite a bit. Stretch it out. So as it's like that, then you can move the governor arm in and kind of at an angle as you're pulling the whole thing up and push it in. It is supposed to be that stretched out, which, yes, seems kind of weird. You can, as you put it back together, you can get your EPA line here and put it back on the nipple as it's all going. And just kind of pull it all up together. And everything is where it's supposed to be. Bolt it back down. You can also at the back get the breather tube for the crankcase vent plugged in, which is kind of hard to do. Don't have a real good view, but you should be able to get that on the back side here. Now that we've got that on, we can get the linkage for the choke on here, and that just goes up straight like that and goes in. Looks like I've got it on choke right now. I'm going to take it off of choke so it'll make it easier. Get back in there. Just allows it to drop down all the way. You can get it lined up. Push that straight in, and it'll snap in there. Next, we've got our solenoid wire. Plug it in. And then all we have is the bolts holding everything together. You do want to clean off the surfaces of each one of these. Make sure that there's no debris or anything in there. If there is, it'll cause it not to seal for that O-ring. I originally don't know why they put Loctite on these. And I don't like that they Loctite them. I'm not going to Loctite them. I find they seize up more than I ever get them to back out. And that's on this, and then there's a similar design with the double barrel carburetor. You want to get these all started by hand too, because if you strip those out, they're not going to go back in. You're going to have issues with the block. Never a good thing. Not a bad angle, but get our fuel line back on. I did have to go ahead and get that with a shut off because it was leaking ever so slightly. Yep, there it goes some more. I'm going to cut it back just a little bit. Give us a better place for it to seal. Get me a pair of needle nose. It's leaking pretty good now for some reason. Guess I had it lower than I did before. If you cut that back just a little bit, it gives it just a better place to sit to. Top slides right back on just as it came off. And there are some grooves on the carburetor here that it does have to sit into as it goes down. Make sure those are lined up, otherwise it won't go back together, right? go. It takes quite a bit of work to get them going sometimes back to 100%, but hopefully this helps somebody out in their quest to get their mower back going on their Briggs V-Twin or their Ariens. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Thanks for watching.